So,
Thank you.
and of course, we'll hold, I think, Q&A at the end, Bridget, unless you feel you're looking at people and you see eyes glazing over or something's, if you feel like people have a question, please feel free to jump right in, if something's not clear. But, let's hold,
Channel everything to your pen.
what's that?
I asked them to channel every.
Um, so today we're going to talk about getting more from online fundraising with email marketing. Now, before we start, this is email marketing, of course, is one channel among many channels. So my approach and what I'm going to be talking about is I'm going to mention social media. I'll mention other things. So we should never approach any sort of marketing that email does this one thing or social media does this one thing. It's all integrated. So that's kind of a disclaimer before we jump in. So we'll talk about why email matters. The next thing we're going to talk about is what makes people tick. Why are people interested in your organization? And then crafting emails that are hopefully an improvement upon what you're doing right now. What you're doing right now is probably great, but what I want to do is I want to focus on the key areas that's actually going to help you improve your email message. And then keeping subscribers interested, of course, and then creating your first drip campaign, kind of a see. So a lot of this is tactical, right? But we're going to start off at the very high level, really about, you could say 30,000 feet, right? But we want to talk about why email still matters, because a lot of organizations I talk to, often I hear, well, email is kind of dead, isn't it? Nobody does email. People do Snapchat. People do Instagram. And so I have to remind people continuously that email is still very relevant right now. In fact, I think of email almost like a passport to the internet. There's nothing you can really do online, regardless of your age, unless you have an email. All right, you really can't buy anything off of Amazon.com. You can't do anything. So you really have to have an email. Everybody has an email. Obviously, different. I guess millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, they all use email differently. But the fact is that everybody has email. Everybody checks an email at some point. Email is not a public channel like Twitter and Facebook. Now, most of you know this, but the reason why this is important is because when people join your email list, let's say they join your email newsletter, let's say they sign a petition, to stand up for justice, or maybe even if they make a donation, they are, in a sense, kind of entering an agreement with you. It's a kind of more private, more access, one-on-one relationship by way of their inbox, which, I mean, if you're like me, your email inbox is a precious territory. You guard it with your life sometimes. And I bet you most of you this morning, in fact, you woke up and in terms of work, possibly, one of the first things you did was you checked email and you basically selected a whole bunch of them, deleted them, and then focused on the important stuff. So we all get too much email. So the point here is that when someone does join your list, it's a big statement compared to just simply following you on Twitter or connecting with you on Facebook. It's a little bit different. Email is also more personalized, so we can't say, Dear Jane on Facebook, and Jane's going to see that. Jane sees the same kind of content that Joe, Billy, and Leroy see, right? So everybody's seeing the same kind of content. Whereas email, we're saying, Dear Jane, we hope it's really great in the name of your city, and we're sending these messages at the right time. So it's really email is much more sophisticated and much more personalized. And there's also this idea that most of you probably already know. Segmentation allows you to send the right message to the right person at the right time. Okay. The last piece I'll just quickly share is that email has a much higher donor conversion rate than social media. And what does this mean? It basically means that it's the most effective digital channel at getting people to take their wallet out of their back pocket or their purse or whatever it is, right? So, in terms of fundraising, there are two pieces that are super critical online, and that is the donation page. That's going to really affect the conversion rate the most. But in terms of the channel that drives the highest conversions is email. And again, when you think about it, it's simply because people have given you permission. They've taken that next step. They're no longer just a Facebook fan. They've joined your list and they say, hey, you know what? I want more. I want a little bit more. What do you have? And they're inviting a relationship at that point. Okay. So this is really critical. And there's been a lot of research about donor conversion rates and email and how it's in this case, 4x as effective as social media. And maybe many of you have had your own experience where you are, doing a fundraiser and you post a link on Facebook and then you're all excited and then you realize, oh, nobody really made a donation. Why? Let's try the same thing with email. Probably, you've seen better hit rates, better success. So if we look at this from another angle, this is like a super simple donor-centric funnel, okay? And it's really the major elements that you have in terms of a funnel online, all right? So this may be new to some of you, so I'm just going to quickly describe what it is. It's basically a marketing funnel or a donor funnel where the top of the funnel is the largest number of people, okay? The bottom of the funnel is the smallest number of people, and these are, in a sense, also stages that people might go through as they engage with a campaign, okay? So, for example, someone signs a petition, to fight against horse abuse, and then they receive a few emails that say, hey, horse abuse, this is the nurture phase. Horse abuse is not a great thing. Thanks for signing the petition. Here's what else. Here's what else you can do. And that's the email messaging. And then we're driving them to take another action, maybe making a donation to support this initiative. And then a small percent of these folks will, of course, share it with their friends. Okay. So if we kind of break this out in terms of social media and email, we can see that social media is kind of top funnel. In other words, that's where you're going to post that petition on Facebook. That's where you're going to tweet out a regular tweet, perhaps, of your email newsletter. Hey, our email newsletter just went out. We covered this topic. If you're not subscribed, click here and join. That sort of thing. So that's fine, as long as, just quickly to have a short 60-second social media discussion. Social media is about relationships and creating value. You are there to offer value, to get people's interest, to kind of separate yourself from the noise. So you're adding value, but you're also asking too. It's really important to ask and say, join our newsletter. You have to kind of pitch it a little bit like, join other people like you, join a community of people standing up for whatever, or a group of people that care about, dogs or vegan or this or that, or, so it's really how you sell it in some ways. And then email is you could say email is mid funnel. Okay. So by the way, so social media is at the top, right? Capturing names and so forth, like with petitions, promoting your newsletter and so forth. But it's also bottom funnel. When someone becomes a donor, you immediately say, hey, great, thank you so much. Share this campaign with your friends, of course. So now we get back onto social media. And then email kind of fits in the middle. So someone is captured, and that's great. You got a name, but what do you do? What kind of messages do you send them? And when do you send them? To nurture that relationship, just like you would a fundraising relationship. You would never go up to someone in person and say, hey, give me your wallet. Oh, you don't have any money? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next person. Hey, give me your wallet. It just won't work in person. And sometimes we forget that, on the other end of the email is actually a real person with feelings. They have, they have to like, know, and trust you in order to take that next step. Okay. So I think this is really just kind of laying the foundation, like strategically where email fits in. Now, most of you already knew that, so that's great. The next thing we're going to talk about, though, is understanding your subscriber, which is pretty important. If we just assume, and I can't tell you, a lot of organizations do this, they assume that their supporters care about the same thing that they care about, right? So someone who works at an animal shelter, let's say, a lot of people that work at animal shelters, understandably, are absolute freaks about dogs and cats and cute turtles and all that stuff. They love it, right? They assume that the world feels the same way, right? And let's say, I'm a dog lover myself, but I also love other things. It doesn't consume as much of my time. So sometimes we just assume that people care about the same thing, but we have to really understand people. We have to understand that they kind of have a dynamic relationship with us as well. This is not when someone joins your list, it's not like they've passed a certain threshold and that means that their love for you is always in the on position. Okay. Eventually things wane, people change their minds, a whole bunch of stuff happens because of life, So we have, stages. You can kind of break this out into. We have acquisition. They join a newsletter. There's onboarding. Yeah. So in other words, acquisition is like when we first get that name. Now what do we do? Right? We have to kind of, nurture that relationship or really think strategically. What do we want that person to do next? Depending upon how they've joined, right? If it's signing a petition, it's one way. Newsletter, it's another way. And then engagement. So these are so within your email, I guess, strategy arsenal, you would also have a broadcast or campaign specific emails like your weekly newsletter or your monthly newsletter, right? Or maybe the end of year email that goes out to everybody. Hey, now's the time. Let's really reach this goal towards the end of the year. And then we have super engagement. So this is really actually a more sophisticated kind of strategy, super engagement, which is really developing campaigns that are triggered by the subscriber. So if someone is an avid newsletter reader, maybe, so for example, well, maybe it's better, the petition's the best example. Someone signs a petition and they get a few emails. People that are opening the emails and reading those emails, following up on the petition, you can, in some tools, you can actually set up a secondary rule that says, I want to send this more kind of aggressive fundraising ask to people that are actually opening up these emails, not the people that are ignoring it, not the person that signed the petition because their brother said, hey, you should sign this petition, right? That's really gets into super engagement. And then transition is really opting out or opting down or unsubscribing, okay? And there's another way to look at this. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. There's lots of diagrams and stuff we can look at, but this is basically saying the same thing, just in a different way. This is more linear, describing the stages, and this is kind of how they all fit together, okay, from left to right, okay? And so to get more emails, again, you have to understand your subscribers. You could do a lot of things, actually. You could research your top emails. Which emails have the high open rates? What are the subject lines? Which articles in your email newsletter get the most clicks? Is there a theme, a regular theme that you see in your email newsletter? That's why, honestly, when we think about these different channels, and this is a tangent, by the way, when we think about these different channels like social media, email, and so forth, we think, oh, we're going to put stuff out there. But we never think about, well, we got to listen to how people think about that or how they react. So email, in a sense, it's always like you have to keep your ear to the ground. How do your email newsletters perform? What sort of topics are people clicking on? What are they opening? And this way we can really learn about our donors. We can understand, what do they care about? Do they care about this issue or that issue? Or an angle? For example, a literacy organization might have 3 different angles that they can come from with respect to the supporter. Do you care about helping families to read? Do you care about children, children's stories about them learning how to read, or adults who've never read before? Now, as an adult, they are learning how to read. What angle, which kind of part of the story or perspective in the story do you like, right? And then we can always survey subscribers. Some people feel, when I mention this, sometimes I hear surveys. People still do surveys? Yes, you can still do surveys. Survey Monkey, Survey Gizmo. A great idea for a survey is, these are just some questions you can ask, okay? What topics are they interested in? How often do they like to receive emails? What devices do they use? What devices they use, I don't think that's so relevant anymore because everybody's using a mobile device. And then, what would make them share your newsletter? That's like a constant thought you're wondering. You're really trying to get inside their head with a survey. A few simple survey questions if you've never surveyed your donors and supporters. After someone makes a donation, have an open form on the thank you page that says, hey, we just want to know what made you decide to support this issue now. Please share your thoughts, or please tell us, and just an open form. That's a good way to start. And then from that, you can decide, wow, okay, maybe we should actually create like a multiple choice question that highlights the common kind of responses, right? Now, as you can imagine, understanding what makes your subscribers tick, we can really go down, we can really spend a lot of time on this. Now, I want to save some time, though, for you. So I actually have a marketing personas workbook. It's free. You do join my email newsletter, but well, you can obviously unsubscribe right away. And then you'll download this workbook. It's a nonprofit marketing personas workbook, and it kind of walks you through, who are your people, gathering all the data, and coming up with some sort of persona, which longer term actually is a living, breathing model for your donors segments. Okay. And it's a little bit more involved than just simply gathering the information that we have time to discuss. And it gets more in depth, but it gives you a general idea, kind of like a template for a persona that represents your supporters. And one more thing about personas. I rarely bump into a nonprofit actually who does this. It's very rare, but the ones that do it can take their storytelling, honestly, they take it to the next level. I've been working over the past year, I was working with Make-A-Wish, actually a few chapters, and they did the heavy lifting of having marketing personas developed. And then my discussion with them around developing marketing strategies was much easier because we really understood the intentions behind their supporters for real. They actually had all this great information, and they created personas. Personas, in a sense, it describes it in the book, but basically they're like fictional representation of your segment. Current donors, volunteers, so forth, and it's literally a person's face. They might even have a name. Debbie Donor. And then they have a description and a personal story and all that. And it's really helps you make it much easier to actually write really great emails and content. So I think this is important, but often over neglected. So the other thing you want to do is you want to figure out, you want to, practice smart segmentation, as I say here. So when you are running email campaigns like your email newsletter, your upcoming event, there might be a volunteer party or anything, you want to ask people to register perhaps, or whatever it is, you want to appropriately segment them. And the software out there, all of it, allows you to segment your subscribers in different ways. One of my favorite ways, and I think one of the most effective ways, is by tagging. Adding a subscriber to a new list for everything gets a little hard to manage, let's put it that way, because then you end up having multiple lists for everything, and then it's just insane to try and actually send an email message to anybody and have it make sense. Tagging allows you to combine different qualities, I guess, of a subscriber. Oh, here's a person who attended an event last year, and they're also a monthly donor. Here's a volunteer who's a monthly donor. You can kind of look at different audiences and slice and dice your audience a little bit better, but you have to segment you have to segment things right at the beginning of any campaign. Decide, how are we identifying this campaign in our database? Because we want to know who's joining this campaign, who's part of this, right? And when I say campaign, again, I mean email newsletter, petition, a survey, making a donation. All of these should be treated as different separate actions and recorded as such with the software. Here's MailChimp, and the prior screen I'm showing is just Constant Contact. All the tools have some sort of segmentation rule in that. Now, the third thing we're going to talk about, and by the way, in terms of segmentation, if you have a good email marketing tool, and I have recommendations we could talk about at the end, they have awesome support, and they will tell you exactly what to do to properly segment your people. So if they're good, you're going to be able to get on the phone with them, or at least have a decent email discussion with them in support. They have good support. So let's talk about the emails that we're actually going to send that will grab attention and drive action. Now these, before we get into this, we're sending a lot of different kinds of emails. So email newsletter, fundraising email, and so forth. So they all have different purposes. These are just general guidelines for most email messages, especially the ones where you're actually asking for action. All right. So first thing we need to do is understand the factors that influence open rates, like recency to online or offline interaction. So for example, and you might want to jot this down, the next time you have an event that people have registered for, and I would have people register for any event if you can. Eventbrite is great for that, by the way, or Event Spot by Constant Contact. But once you do that and you have that event, people have a great time, you send an email the next day that says, subject line, pictures from last night, okay? And of course, you want to stay on people's minds. They always want to know what's next. And in that email, yes, you're going to show them the pictures, but you're also going to tell them what's next. Thanks so much for coming to the event. Make sure that you reserve your spot in our really cool other thing that we have going on. Or, hey, if you want to stay in touch with us, join our email newsletter, whatever that next step is after that event. Okay. And the other factors are recognition of sender, which we'll talk about, subject line. I think everybody knows about that. Forwarded from a friend, which I don't think you have much control over. I mean, you can have that feature in your email that says, hey, forward this to a few friends. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of information about how effective that is because it's hard to collect that data. And then relevance is the other thing. So the message should be relevant to the user. So we talked about understanding your audience. We're not going to talk about this anymore, but we should, remind ourselves that there are different segments within our audience. So of all the people connected to our organization, you might have current donors, volunteers, recent action takers, and so forth. Okay. With our email, generally speaking, we want to tell really powerful stories, stories that make people want to sit up and say, what? What is this? A woman fell down the well? You really have to kind of grab people's attention and get them involved emotionally. That's the critical thing. If you appeal to people in your message, if your story is really just a bunch of statistics, you're going to bum people out and they're not going to take any action. I hate to say it, but statistics are great. Hey, let's all support science, statistics, all this stuff. But in terms of fundraising, it's really, and actually the research, the science does show this, that people take action when they feel something, not when they think something, but when they feel something. So you have to have that powerful story. And here are a few examples here. You can check these out later. And I'm sure maybe, another thing you might want to do just as an aside is make sure that you've joined the email lists of your admired competitors. Okay. Now, look up and look at the organizations that you think, wow, these guys are pretty savvy. I like what they're doing for X, Y, or Z reasons. Join their email list, and you can really learn a lot from their email messages. So tell a powerful story. Write 3 subject lines for each email message. The reason why you want to do this is because you want to also test the messages, which we can talk about later. But here's just a couple of strategies in terms of the email message itself. I mean, subject line, sorry. Adding value and answering what's in it for me, okay? So you want to state why should someone open up the email? What kind of value are they going to get? Build anticipation, an incentive to register early for an event. One way to create urgency that's actually fairly low-hanging fruit is to talk about limited space, okay? That limited space. If you're trying to promote an event, make sure there's at least one email that says, space, spots are limited space, reserve your seat now, don't wait, that sort of thing. You want to kind of drive that sort of action. And then, offering any other kind of value. For an email newsletter, it may not be a good idea. It may be a good idea to say something newsletter in the subject line so that people know it's part of a regular thing, right? So maybe in brackets, you can say newsletter. And then, in the subject line, though, pull out maybe one article or featured story or something that's going to really entice people to open the email, okay? So once you write these messages, you want to make sure that you want to kind of test them out. So one tool that I love, actually, it's called the Emotional Marketing Value Headline Analyzer. And it's kind of ironic because it's supposed to test how emotional and the emotional oomph of a title. It could be a blog post title, an email subject line. It doesn't really matter, but it's actually the worst name that you can possibly have for something that actually does that, the Emotional Marketing Value Headline Analyzer. It's horrible. It's a big snooze fest. So you type your words in here, and it will basically score it, and you can see, oh, can I get higher than a 30%? Can I get higher than a 40%? And just spending a few minutes here will help you improve your subject line. And they give you lots of tips on what you can do. But if you follow the basic best practices that you've probably heard already about subject lines, I think you'll be fine, but definitely test it out. All right. Your message should be about your supporters, not about the organization. Okay. So the message generally you want to write in second person narrative. You want to talk to only one person actually. So one tip I offer my clients is I say, hey, who's your favorite supporter? The one that you've gotten together and you've had coffee with, you're good friends with, and this person's really, they're pretty dedicated, and they understand the cause, and they understand the pains and what it's like to be a supporter, what it's like to be in this situation. And so you want to write, an email to that person because that's your audience, right? Your audience is really your ideal supporter. You want to treat them like gold. So write in second person narrative, use their first name. I'm not a big fan of dear. Maybe it's because my first name is John. But, and then you can also use additional merge fields, right? So if I worked with one client, a lupus organization, and they were having a hard time resuscitating people that registered for a walkathon. So people would say, yes, I'm registered. I'm going to create a fundraising page. And then they wouldn't follow up. So we learned that during the process of registration, they actually entered the name of someone that they were walking in support of or honor of. And so the follow-up campaign to rejuvenate these folks was, fundraising's really difficult. We know. And we want to help you out. We know you started a page and we want to be there for you. And we know that you did this initially because of your friend Mark or your friend Barbara, and so we want to help you get there. If you need any help, here's a video, here's a link, here's an article, here's a how-to, call us on the phone, whatever it is. And that was quite effective at resuscitating it because it made it really personal and made it about the supporter, okay? Convey urgency, I think I mentioned this earlier. A great way to convey urgency with any fundraising event, I'm telling you, any fundraising event, in fact, you should do this for all your fundraising events, is find that donor who can provide a match that will serve as an incentive. You can also, as I said before, like limited seats, a deadline, something like that, but make sure that you're conveying urgency in some way. My favorite way is a match, this, especially in a fundraising, online fundraising or year end, in fact, matches are so powerful. And then include the call to action, of course. Now, call to actions are kind of tricky, right? So we've all been in that meeting where, someone who thinks that they know everything about the internet, they say, well, we've got to have the donate button on our website. We've got to have donate button on our email. It's like this over focus on this donate button. But actually, the truth is that donate actually isn't really a great word to use if we're talking about moving people to take action. And I'll get into that in just a second, but we want to make sure that this action is really clear and easy to understand what we're asking them to do. So for example, and I've kind of talked about this 2 seconds ago, but basically you want to pick language that's in alignment with the cause or what their intentions are. And there's a formula that I have. Unfortunately, I don't have a slide, but basically it's verb, impact. That's the formula. Verb, impact. 3 words, maybe 4. The first word is a verb. What are people doing? They're going to give. They're going to stand. They're going to feed, maybe. They want to feed a family or feed this. And so then the impact is the rest of the phrase, right? Give clean water. Stand up against injustice. Feed a hungry family. Stand with the folks that are, protesting the pipeline. That sort of thing. So, because when you think about it, again, if we go back to something I mentioned very early on, we're dealing with people. We're dealing with emotion. We're dealing with the brain, an animal that, quite frankly, is so incredibly irrational, but is guided by emotions. We have great hearts. We have great minds. We have to engage people in their hearts, and this is really getting at that point. If we say donate to us, give us money, it's really taking the supporter or the potential supporter out of the narrative. But when we use a call to action that says give clean water, we're putting that donor in the fundraising story. We're making that donor part of the impact, which is, honestly speaking, that's all they want. That's the only reason why they're in the game anyhow, is to make that sort of impact. So we have to connect them to that, right? Before you send your message, by the way, just send yourself a final text message on your phone. Check it out, see if you can read it. There's a worksheet that follows up in here to help you with an email, the next email that you craft, and maybe give a little bit of guidance around that your first time doing it. And then, of course, when you get subscribers, you want to keep them interested. So just, and by the way, how much time do I have? I'm sorry. Am I going too long?
No, no, you're good.
What do I have, like 5 minutes?
You're 5 minutes.
Perfect. I'm going to do it. 5 minutes. All right.
7 minutes. Yeah.
Great. So when you have people join your email list, make sure that you're getting permission. Never add someone to your email list because you think they should be on your email list, because then you're going to hurt your open rates over time. You always want to get permission, especially with a newsletter. When someone joins your newsletter, send a double confirmation just to make sure they really want to be on the newsletter. Set the expectation. When someone joins your email newsletter or signs a petition or whatever, you need to send an email right away, and tell them what they can expect. What's the next step? This is an example of someone who might join an email newsletter. And so we're following up and saying, hey, here's what to expect. You're going to receive one email newsletter a week, and your email will never be shared with anyone, and so forth. Okay. Segment your list, like I said before. People interested in events. These are just some examples of how you might think about segmenting. People that have registered for events, who downloaded a resource like a guide or a checklist or whatever. And there's a little bit of an echo, by the way. And then people who joined a campaign or they registered for an event. All right. And then, ongoing, obviously listen and offer value. So this comes under the topic of keeping subscribers interested, right? So how can we keep them interested unless we know what they're interested in? So we always have to keep listening to people, all right? So the last thing we're going to talk about is your first drip campaign, okay? Now, a drip campaign, this is what I would call kind of a low-hanging fruit in online fundraising that a lot of organizations somehow skip, okay? The first thing I'll just mention is that blasting your list is good because it's very easy and so forth. But the bad of blasting your list is that it's often seen as an interruption. Okay. So when you send out that email blast, that fundraising email or whatever, it's basically going to be seen as an interruption. Drip campaigns kind of solve this problem in a lot of ways because drip campaigns are triggered by the subscriber. It's on their timeline. And some examples would be, as I said before, onboarding, encouraging more donations, donation page abandonment. That's a little bit more sophisticated. If someone leaves your donation page, you can send an email that says, hey, it looks like you tried to make a donation, but you didn't. Here's the link. Try again. But it's the right message to the right person. And that's basically the idea. And then selecting the sender. All right. Now, a drip campaign, when we create it, here's a quick example in like 2 seconds, or not 2 seconds, but 60 seconds. I'm going to share a quick example. So there's a petition in this case, and it's saying, hey, this is really unjust. Demand justice for Cecil, which we're all familiar with the story. The first message is, hey, now the trigger, by the way, that kicks this whole process off, someone signs the petition. They immediately get a message that says, thank you for signing the petition. Always say thank you first. Here's what else you can do, right? Thank you for signing the petition. You just made a great decision. It was awesome. Now here's what else you can do. You can learn more about this campaign and you can share it with your friends. They receive that automatically, right? Now they just signed a petition. Hammering them over a head with a donation may not be a smart thing. We want to try and, we don't want to ask them to get married before we go out to dinner with them, okay, so to speak. And then we say, maybe there's another message that goes out a couple days later in this example. So, hey, thanks for signing the pledge. And thanks for sharing it, by the way. And listen, we're almost to meeting our goal at fighting this injustice or whatever it is. Here's what else you can do, by the way. You can donate now. And of course, with more sophisticated email marketing tools, you can actually set it up so that the donate now email is only received by people that opened up the first email. All right, so now where you're very highly selective about the right message to the right person, okay? And then the third one might be to turn up the heat a little bit, matching donor. There's a matching donor. If you give now, we can really, make our goal, all right? And this is kind of a simple drip campaign, which can be set up in any email marketing software like Constant Contact, MailChimp, and so forth. And you simply write the messages, you schedule them, and then you just kind of, I don't want to say set it and forget it, but essentially you can set it and forget it, but you want to also, see how things are working, right? Are people actually opening these emails? Yes, you want to know that. Are they clicking on the links in these follow-up emails? Yes, you want to know that. and that's going to help you improve those messages over time. But this is really, a lot of organizations miss out on this process, and I feel like it's such low-hanging fruit. Why communicate to someone just once when you can automatically communicate with them and touch them a couple of more times, remind them about your website or whatever it is, and get a little bit more kind of timely action from that person. Okay. So with that, wow, that was exactly 5 minutes, in fact. And so now we can open it up for questions, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're
Go
very
ahead.
now, do you want to
Can you
see
hear?
oh, thank you. You guys are so nice. Awesome. All right. So here I am, and I'm ready for questions. Anything is fine. I can't see anybody, but I hope I look okay. I mean, did my best with the lighting here and all that, Janice
No,
Joplin
you're
in the background, Johnny Cash, Janice Joplin. Who else do you need? They can help us out.
So but before we go into question, I want to urge every one of you who's interested in learning more to subscribe to John's email. Yeah, and he also does some live Facebook short tutorials, as I understand that, and they're really, really good.
Thank you.
So, Yolene had a question.
Yes. Oh, by the way, Birgit, can you repeat the question, because I may not be able to hear it unless there's a microphone right in front of the person, so I don't know.
Well, we can try the microphone.
Or you can repeat it, either way.
How do you prevent your email end up in the spam box?
Did you hear that?
It was a short question, I know that, but it was something about email inbox. Those are the two parts I heard.
So email spam, how you can prevent that the email gets into a spam folder.
Yeah, that's great. So you want to, it's not like there's a magic word you're using, right? Like it's free, we're mentioning free. It's actually a number of things you can spam. Mainly what you have control over is what you're sending to people. All right. So if you're adding people to a list that they don't want to be on, and they're receiving an email that they didn't expect to receive, they can potentially mark it as spam. With Gmail, depends on the kind of tool that you're using, but with Gmail, many times an email from a nonprofit or a business will go under promotions or updates or something like that, like another tab within the email tool. You don't have too much control over that. It's not like you can tell people, hey, move our email into your primary folder. I mean, that's a little kind of arrogant if you think about it, right? I mean, you're basically assuming that you're the most important thing and to put people in the primary inbox. Now, some people, of course, they will put you in the primary inbox because they are rabid followers and they are really intense email subscribers, and they want to support in any possible way. So those folks naturally will drag that possibly into the primary inbox. But in terms of spam, a lot of it has to do with the reputation of the sender, which is both you, in a sense, and the email marketing provider, the software provider. That's why when you sign up to an email tool like MailChimp or Constant Contact, they're really careful about asking you, what is this list anyhow? Are these people legitimate? Did they give you permission to send you emails? This is why we are always asked these questions, because it definitely impacts spam. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
Or, if you want to ask a follow-up question, that's fine too.
Yeah.
I had a question regarding, I know you mentioned personalizing the emails, but what do you do when the database emails do not include a first or last name because they've entered it quickly or they've just included it? I mean, what would you recommend in that regard?
Yeah. So that actually is a really interesting question because it opens up a couple of issues. How much information do you ask in each situation, right? So if someone makes a donation, hopefully they're going to join your email list, and hopefully you're asking for their first name, last name, and people expect that. They're making a donation, they're going to give you that information. If someone joins your email list, it's in terms of newsletter, you may be asking for a lot to require first name and last name. If you require that, people understandably will ask, why are you asking for my first name and last name? Why do you need that for an email newsletter, right? So in that instance, I usually recommend ask for only email, right? Now, to answer your question, you have situations where you don't have a first name there. And check with your email marketing tool, because some of them can do this. Basically replace the first name with friends. So it would say, the email would say, Dear John, Dear Mary, Dear Sue, or it would say, Dear friend. So you can kind of often merge in a word that will substitute for an empty record or an empty field. Okay. But but in terms of actually getting that information, this is why we want to follow up, register for an event, take our survey. We want to survey our email newsletter subscribers. Take the survey, and in that process, they're giving you their first name. There might be other ways that you might ask for their first name. That's why I think how we acquire emails. We really have to think about it from multiple ways, right? Joining our email newsletter, registering for an event. If we do webinars, hey, register for the webinar, give us a little bit more information. But the information you gather obviously has to be relevant to the situation. And it has to make sense to the subscriber. You can't say, hey, join our email newsletter, fill out your entire address, and by the way, give us your social security number and credit card. I mean, they would be like, what, are you crazy? So that's not going to work. We have to think about each situation.
Right. Oh, thank you. That
Oh, yeah.
helps a lot.
Oh, you're welcome.
Next one.
Next question. Yes, I'm ready.
I want to know, do you make an email address just for this email newsletter that you're doing so that it's not your personal work email address? Do you make something unique so you capture all that data?
Mm-hmm.
So your box is not filled with all things.
Yeah. So are you talking about the email that of someone who's joining your list, or are you talking about the sending email?
It's the sending email.
Oh, the sending email. Okay. Wow. I'm so glad you asked that question. And, I apologize. You might be an email subscriber of mine. So I don't do what I'm recommending, which is, yes, have a separate address that says newsletter or news or something like that, a separate email, sorry. So it would say news at your organization or newsletter at your organization. And also there's a no reply rule. So you can actually set up a no reply email, which basically tells people, hey, you can't really reply to this email. If you want to, that's great. If you want to have people reply to news or something like that, that's fine. But I would have a separate email, especially if you're sending out emails as well yourself. It's just easier to manage that way. But in terms of deliverability, the address that you put into the field, it should be it should be your nonprofit's domain, right? So it should be at the name of your organization.org. You should never send a marketing email from Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, and all that stuff, because that's an instant flag for spam. I'm telling you, you won't even get into the inbox if you do that. It's difficult.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Jim has a
I
question.
don't know if you can hear me. Would you have a different way to describe donor privacy or subscriber privacy that you would put in separate emails? How are you going to use that information?
That's a great question. So I think this is a really good idea. Whoever asked that, this is an important question. I think we all need to answer this. When we, and this helps, by the way, in terms of, in fact, in my slide presentation, I think I was even talking about it, keeping subscribers interested, right? So keeping people interested. So we have to, let me see here, in fact. We have to set the expectations. Yeah, that's what I was saying. So we want to tell people, your email's private. We're not going to sell it to anybody. We're not going to use it for any other purpose except for to communicate with you. Okay, and you want to make that really clear. I'm not a lawyer, so I wouldn't claim to say this is what you should do for your organization. But basically, you want to be really clear with people and tell them that they're joining their email list, your list, and you're not going to sell it or share their email with anybody. You completely respect their privacy, and the intended use for this email is to communicate with you. Don't say the intended purpose is to send you emails. Okay, there's a fine line there. If you say send emails, then you're kind of boxed into, well, we can only send this person emails. If you say to communicate with, then you kind of covered yourself in terms of doing a Facebook ad campaign that might be targeting a custom audience with that person on that email list. So if you've asked that permission at the outset, then you're being honest and upfront. That's really what this is about. It's about telling people what they're getting when they join an email list. And I'm sure you've all had the experience where you join an email list and you're kind of wondering, what's going on? I haven't heard anything. What's the next thing? Did they get my email? What am I going to get? So that is called subscriber remorse, right? Seriously, this is a thing. Okay. We have buyer's remorse. I bought something that I don't want anymore. Actually, my son had buyer's remorse during right before Christmas, actually, or after Christmas. He got a video game for the Xbox One. Now we have an Xbox 360, right? Talk about buyer's remorse. That's the wrong thing for the wrong tool for the wrong job. So we have donor's remorse. I made a donation. There's no follow up. There's silence. Whatever. People have second thoughts. Same thing with email, right? So I think this is a really important question. Definitely get people's permission and respect their privacy. But in terms of the language, just be clear that your intent is to communicate with them. To communicate with them. Okay?
I have one question.
That was a long answer.
Regarding those subscribers that unsubscribe, do you have any strategy for trying to get them back?
Yeah, that's great. So there's actually, and I think I even mentioned it in one of these slides. Let me just see here. Oh yeah, there was a slide in the deck that talked about transition. So opt out, opt down. So in some instances, you can actually ask people if they go to unsubscribe, you can send them to a page that says, hey, if you want to unsubscribe, it's totally cool. But would you rather receive less emails? If you want to unsubscribe from all of our fundraising emails, please do. If you only want to receive our email newsletter, please do. So giving people those options, I think, is really important. If you just have one global unsubscribe button for everything, and that's the only option you're giving people, then you're not really giving them that choice that they can actually have with a lot of email software. Now, I think, in order to do this, actually, it's a little complicated, obviously. So it's saying the software essentially has to figure out, is this person, they don't want to receive any emails, or is it just certain types of emails, newsletter, fundraising emails, and so forth. So you have to kind of discern if your software can actually handle that kind of rule. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Mark has a question.
Are there any tips, tricks, do's and don'ts about email signatures that you've seen people do well or not well?
About email signatures?
Yes, email signatures.
Wow, an email signature. Do you mean like an email, like if you're sending an email to someone from your own like Outlook or something like that, like the signature in the bottom?
Could be that. Could be bottom of the newsletter. Do you have links to your Twitter account, links to your Instagram account, and suggestions about that?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. So it does depend upon the email. So a fundraising email, for example, you would never say, hey, follow us on Twitter. Hey, follow us on Facebook. Because you know what? Given the choice, I'd rather follow you on Facebook than take the wallet out of my back pocket. I mean, honestly speaking, if you're going to present that choice, you have to be clear about what your goal is for each message. So in a fundraising email, the signature, it's just, it's got to be really sincere. Thank you so much. Fundraising emails are best sent if they're from the executive director or from a person that people respect. So the sender field in the message shouldn't say, well, I don't want to say shouldn't, but, if you are doing this, you have the name of your organization as in the sender field. That's great, but try using a person's name. Sometimes that influences the open rate, But in terms of the signature, like a newsletter, a newsletter might have something. It depends on what the goals are. Generally speaking, you're going to get less action the further down in the email. In a fundraising email, one thing that works really well is a PS. A PS is kind of these very harmless looking statements, like, kind of casual, like, hey, you can make a donation if you want to, but, we're here and we're the PS. I'm talking like as if I'm a personified PS after the signature, right? So it's very casual, and also it's just almost like a last chance to get that person's attention. PS. the matching donation ends this, give them obviously some news. Don't just say, P.S. donate now and you will have good karma. You have to say something that's going to be like, it's going to make sense to them. If it's a personal email, like a welcome email, like I said before, we have maybe a donor onboarding series or a newsletter, someone who just joined your email newsletter. Maybe that's perfect, right? So send that first welcome email that says, hey, thanks for joining the newsletter. Here's what to expect. And while you're here, why don't you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and so forth? So it does depend upon the communication. The question to ask in each message is, what do we want people to do? And how does that make sense to them in terms of their expectations about what's next? So if someone joins your email newsletter, the follow-up email wouldn't be, hey, give us money because we have a matching donor. Right now, you got to pull out your wallet. Let's do it now. We got to make this thing happen. That's not going to be well received given the fact that they just joined your email newsletter. If they signed a petition and it's really urgent, maybe that's another story, So it does depend upon the situation. Typical answer from a consultant, right?
Yeah.
It depends. Write that check out too.
All right. Well, Sam has a question.
Hi, Don. I am Sam, and I'm curious if you have any software that actually does heat mapping at a reasonable price.
What mapping?
Heat mapping.
Heat mapping.
Oh, you know what? So actually, there is some. I'm not too familiar with all the different tools out there for heat mapping, but I know that there is one called Crazy Egg. I don't know if you've heard of it. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
And also Google Analytics actually has not a heat map, but almost like what gets the most action on your pages. So you can look at, in a sense, kind of a heat map of your web pages on your website with Google Analytics. There is a feature in there. You have to kind of hunt around for it. And quite honestly, maybe somebody else knows the name of it, but it's almost like a live view of a page.
Insight analytics.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's an on-page insight. You open up a page on your website and it will show you, hey, this is what's happening. People are clicking on all these links on this web page.
It tells you how many percentage clicked on this link, on this link, on this link.
Yeah, so in a sense, that's kind of a heat map, but I think you were talking about the mouse and where the mouse is going and how people are interacting with stuff, Yeah, heat maps it's interesting. They have an interesting future. I don't know if heat maps are going to be terribly relevant the way that things are going, especially with an iPhone, It's hard to really determine and gather much kind of mousing or you can capture a lot of stuff, but in terms of like a heat map, that may not be applicable to a mobile device. It's going to be more about clicks, taps, clicks, and so forth.
More questions?
What was the link to define the emotional marketing value?
Oh, yeah. That is actually in the slides. I'm sorry. There is a link in there. You know what I can do? Here's what I'll do. I'm going to send this through the chat. So maybe you can grab it and then share it with everybody after. Let me just see. Or you can obviously look at the slides later and say, okay, cool, here it is. Let me see if I can find that though.
Well, I can put it in the follow-up email tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Here we go. I have it right here. And I'm just going to grab the link. Sorry. Okay. Great. And here's the chat link, just so that you guys have it now in case you want to share it now. It's pretty short. aminstitute.com/headline. That's what I'm seeing. So.
Another question.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sure.
While you're doing that, what is your suggestion for the length of email when you're doing email marketing? Because I come, upon people that have like these. If you go to print them, they're like 20 pages. So I just want to know, like, do you have a recommended length? Should it fit within a certain character?
Or for the email message, or for the subject line, or the message?
The message itself. I mean, and should the subject line be really long as well?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Subject lines are kind of tricky. The key with a subject line is you want to get people's attention. So there's no magic formula around the length. Generally speaking, you want to have less than, say, 80 characters or so in the, that's even a long subject line. But some cases, in fact, there's a few organizations that use one word in the subject line, and those get the high open rates. So it's almost like, how can the subject line stand apart from the average length, I guess, of a subject line in the inbox? That's one, again, that's kind of a tactic, if you like. But in terms of the body, I have to be honest with you, most organizations I work with, when we work on email messages, I always let them take the first draft. I say, hey, powerful story. Here's the framework. Here's how you write the email. Give me a first draft. It can just be a very rough first draft. And always, every single instance, I tell them, cut it in half. Cut the text down by 50%. Every single person, every single client I've ever worked with in that regard, it always comes back less than 50%. And then, of course, the question you always want to look at with your email message, you always want to ask, especially if we're talking about a fundraising email. Now, fundraising email is obviously kind of mission critical in some ways, because we really are depending upon some kind of action. An email newsletter, of course, we want people to open it, right? But it's not so directly tied to a financial outcome, right? So we want people to clearly take action. So every single sentence should serve that goal. How does the sentence move the person to the next action? Generally speaking, less is more. Way less is more. In any kind of email, if you're trying to drive action, focus more on images, like a nice image in the story that's linked to your donation page or linked to your registration page, and just keep the text very short, concise, and right to the point. Always make it about them, and follow the best practices that we kind of talked about. But you can keep it really short and sweet and get right to the point. And as soon as you move someone, you want to give them an opportunity to take action. So there's also, keep it super concise, only serve the goal, value their time, and add value to them, kind of keep them moving emotionally. The format of a typical message, you could say, is kind of following the format of a story, right? Which is the hook, the problem, right? There's the hook, which means you got to grab their attention with that subject line, the story, that emotional story, this woman that fell down the well. Wow, keep going. You've got me. This is a page turner. That's the hook. The problem, you have to talk about a problem, especially if you want people to take action. People will not take action if they think there's no problem. Oh, no problem here. Okay, let me move on. You don't want that. You want to tell them there's a problem, right? So the problem could be basically, what's the obstacle that we need your help with? This is a family and they're really hungry, or these dogs are, they need to be adopted. We need more support to help this goal. So always talk about impact. That's the problem. There's an obstacle they want to overcome. And of course, overcoming that obstacle is the third part of the story, or the framework of an email, which is the payoff, or you could say the call to action. Give clean water, take action now, feed hungry children, that sort of thing. So that hook, then the problem, and then tell people what to do. By the way, when people open up your email, especially if it's like a fundraising email, they want you to get right to the point. Okay. If they open the email, you've got them. You've got their ear. You just have to get right to the point and just be, you have to tell an emotional story. You can't just say, hey, cute puppy, no home, give money. You can't write something like that, but kind of from your heart. But in more cases than not, I will say, in terms of this length question about, like, how long should a message be? Yeah, I can tell you right now, you're not going to have the problem where you're writing an email message that's too short. Now, don't take that personally. I'm just saying that whatever you write, you should always cut it down, always, to just something that's very elegant and very quick. And keep in mind, when people look at your message, this is what they're doing. They're looking at their phone. If you give them something very dense to look at and read, and without moving them on, without some reason for them to stick around, then you're going to lose a lot of people. And of course, with email marketing, we can always test, hey, let's write a really long fundraising email versus a really short fundraising email, and let's see which one gets the more clicks. So you could take that route too. Either way.
Yeah. So we have one last question from Craig.
Any kind of trends on embedding pictures or videos into?
Did you say trends on video?
Images or video.
Oh, images or video. Yeah. So in email, I've seen GIF images lately in some emails. So you can actually put in some software, you can put in a GIF image. You can't run a video in an email, unfortunately. Most tools will, pretty much give you like a thumbnail. That's usually what I see, and what you've seen, I'm sure, is that you'll get an email message with a thumbnail image of the video. You click on the video, and then you can watch the video. So that's the technology. But I think videos, people love videos. They want to watch videos. And if it's, especially if it's entertaining and super short, they're going to be likely to click on that. And especially if it's, leading them down the right path. Just be really careful. You don't want to say, hey, we are really trying to achieve this fundraising goal, and this is a really kind of a mission critical fundraising email. You don't want to say, hey, now's the time to give. By the way, there's a video you can watch too, because guess what? You're going to lose a lot of people. Maybe that video should have gone out, a couple of days ahead of time, and then you're following up and saying, hey, remember that story? Here's what you can do. So think about how you're using the video as well.
All right. Well, I have one last question for you, John.
Great. All right.
What would you